The Mariana Trench, which is the lowest point on planet Earth.
Out the growing amount of plastic waste in our seas. Well, now a plastic bag has been found in the deepest part of the ocean.
A pressured hum vibrated through the titanium shell of the autonomous submersible as it slipped beneath the final band of sunlight and into the abyss. For years, expeditions had pressed against the crushing limits of the Mariana Trench, wrestling with the challenge of depth, pressure, and darkness. But this time was different. The underwater drone, engineered with adaptive pressure skin plating and a next-generation sensory lattice, descended farther and more confidently than any remotely operated vehicle before it. What waited at the bottom was expected to be sediment, silence, and perhaps a few hardy deep-sea creatures. Instead, it revealed a scene so unexpected that the feed technicians monitoring the dive froze mid-breath, their screens awash with images that defied every prediction. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. As the drone crossed into the Hadal zone, where pressure exceeded 8 tons per square inch, its cameras began to register faint, rhythmic flashes in the distance. At first, they resembled bioluminescent organisms drifting lazily through the darkness. But the pulses were too consistent, too structured. Unlike the random flickers produced by deep-sea life, these lights appeared in repeating intervals. The drone sensors flagged the anomaly immediately, tagging the flashes as non-organic and urging the operators to focus the camera array. The deeper it went, the clearer the phenomenon became. Something down there was producing light in patterns that resembled codes, deliberate, measured signals radiating through the black water. The trench walls narrowed as the vehicle steered through a series of jagged geological spires. Hydrothermal vents hissed and roared, casting shimmering distortions across the drone's lights. 1,000 meters below the deepest confirmed point of human exploration, the trench floor spread into a basin that no natural topography map had ever suggested. It appeared almost carved, as if shaped by forces beyond the slow grind of tectonics. The drone glided forward, stabilizers adjusting for the unpredictable currents flowing from the trench's unseen depths. The lights came into view all at once, not scattered as before, but arranged across the basin floor like constellations laid flat upon sediment. The configuration stretched for hundreds of meters, a vast mosaic of luminous structures embedded into the ground. Their glow was cool, silver blue, diffusing through the water like fog over a moonlit valley. At first glance, they looked like crystalline spires arranged in fractal geometry. At second glance, they looked intentional. The drone's LiDAR swept across the formation, mapping their dimensions. Each structure appeared perfectly symmetrical, grown or built with mathematical precision far too complex to be accidental. Their arrangement aligned with no known natural pattern, and yet they resonated with the elegance of natural law. It was as though the trench had hidden a secret architecture all along, a geometry born in impossible conditions, thriving in a realm where life was not supposed to exist. As the drone hovered above the formation, the crystalline lattice pulsated in response, the once steady light patterns shifting into a new, more rapid sequence. Analysts topside scrambled to decode the pulses, suspecting a reactive process triggered by the probe's presence. The timing of the bursts corresponded with the drone's power output fluctuations, almost as if the structures detected and analyzed the intruder's electromagnetic signature. The event became even stranger when tendrils of shimmering particulate matter rose from the bases of the crystalline towers, curling like smoke toward the drone. The particles swirled around the submersible, attracted to its hull. The drone's sensors recorded an immediate temperature shift, slight but noticeable given the frigid depths. The particulate moved in patterns resembling currents, yet it flowed independently of the surrounding water. It was behaving like a swarm guided by a unified awareness. Operators debated whether to pull the drone back. But before the command could be sent, the particulate tendrils converged, forming a luminous sheath around the vehicle. The membrane shimmered as if analyzing the drone from every angle. Then, in a synchronized, almost graceful motion, the crystalline structure's light deepened into a rich violet hue, and the drone's sensors recorded a burst of energy that traveled through the particulate and into the surrounding water. The burst revealed what had been hidden. For a moment, the faint outline of a colossal shape flickered across the basin floor, a structure larger than any natural formation known in the trench. The image was faint, like a shadow glimpsed through fog, but clear enough to suggest dimensions and symmetry far beyond geological chance. It spanned hundreds of meters, perhaps thousands, its surface etched with repeating patterns that the sensor algorithms struggled to categorize. The formation did not resemble any known form of human engineering or deep-sea mineral growth. It was something else entirely, a latticework of unknown material woven into the trench floor itself. The operators immediately boosted the drone's field illumination. When the light beam washed across the basin, the shadows resolved just slightly, enough to reveal edges, smooth, deliberate edges. Beneath layers of sediment, a colossal structure was embedded in the seabed, its geometry precise and impossibly complex. It resembled a massive platform or shell, though nothing about its shape seemed purely functional or decorative. It existed in the ambiguous space where engineering met art, where purpose merged with beauty. As the drone lowered itself closer, vibrations rippled through the water column. The crystalline spires reacted again, emitting a deeper harmonic resonance that the audio sensors captured as a layered, almost musical sound. The frequency range extended beyond what humans could naturally perceive, but translating it into audible tones revealed harmonics that felt intentional, rhythmic, almost like a chorus performed by non-biological throats. The particulate matter around the drone shifted in response to the resonance, spiraling upward in elegant helixes. Analysis later suggested that the particles were not organic nor mineral, but a hybrid of both, a form of matter capable of responding to electromagnetic fields and to sound itself. The swirl moved with precision, never colliding, forming patterns of spirals, lattices, and intersecting rings. It was as though the trench floor had become a stage for a performance, one that activated only in the presence of observers. For 20 minutes, the operators watched in astonishment as the structures continued their rhythmic pulses. The acoustic harmonics grew more complex, and the substratum beneath the sediment seemed to vibrate in resonance. The drone detected currents sweeping outward from the submerged platform, though no physical source was visible. These currents carried microstructures, scaled-down versions of the luminous crystals that drifted gently like spores in a breeze. The drone collected samples automatically. But as it stored the particulate matter, it recorded an unusual phenomenon. The particles subtly reorganized inside the containment chamber, rearranging themselves into new configurations whenever the drone adjusted depth or orientation. There was no visible propulsion mechanism guiding their movement. Instead, they appeared to respond to environmental changes in a way that suggested some form of informational sensitivity. As researchers monitored the feed, the implications began to settle into a tense and electric awareness. If these structures and particulates were natural, then the definition of nature had just expanded far beyond known boundaries. If they were artificial, then they represented engineering far beyond any human achievement. And if they were neither, if they belonged to some third category yet to be conceived, then the world had just glimpsed a frontier not only unexplored, but unimagined. The drone continued mapping the basin. Every new angle revealed alternatives to the previous interpretations. From one perspective, the crystalline structures resembled growths, like mineral formations shaped by unknown chemical processes. From another, they looked like components of a system, nodes in a vast network spanning the trench's hidden depths. When the sonar scanned deeper into the substratum, it detected hollow chambers beneath the colossal platform, ranging from small cavities to vast hollows stretching horizontally for hundreds of meters. Some chambers emitted faint electromagnetic signatures, pulsing in synchrony with the surface structures. The synchronization was unmistakable. Whatever lay beneath the seafloor was active, yet there was no sign of motion in the biological sense. No limbs, no organisms, no evidence of conscious life. The intelligence, if one called it that, seemed embedded in the material itself. The architecture, the crystals, the particulate swarm, the resonant chambers, everything behaved as though part of a unified system, communicating or reacting in ways no natural environment ever had. The drone shifted closer to one of the crystalline towers to obtain a microscan, but as it approached, the tower brightened once more and the particulate mist thickened around the vehicle. The drone's lights flickered. Its instruments recorded a brief spike in internal temperature, again tiny but impossible given the surrounding water's near-freezing conditions. The temperature rise was localized precisely where the particulate touched the hull, suggesting a transference of energy too controlled to be random. Then, for an instant so brief that the feed technicians replayed it dozens of times, the particles formed a pattern against the drone's viewport. It resembled a spiral of nested curves intersecting with precise angles. It was gone in less than a second, scattering into the water as though never formed at all. But the recorded image remained, a configuration too organized, too deliberate to dismiss. The pattern seemed reminiscent of mathematical principles found in biological growth and cosmic formations alike, a universal geometry manifesting in a place that should have been barren. The deeper chambers beneath the trench continued to respond to the crystalline tower's activity. Sensors detected tremors not of tectonic origin, but finely tuned vibrations that triggered slight shifts in the sediment cover. More of the submerged platform's edges emerged into view, and the scope of the structure became increasingly apparent. It was not a monolith, but a complex assembly of interlocking forms, each echoing the same spiraling geometry seen in the particulate's brief display. It was not static either. Certain plates or segments exhibited microscopic shifts, minute pulsations as though breathing at a geological pace. Despite the crushing pressure, despite the silence of the deep ocean, the area felt alive. The drone ventured toward a depression at the far end of the basin, where sonar readings suggested a deeper access point. The mouth of the depression opened into a narrow fissure that dipped into a darker abyss. When the drone approached, the crystalline spires nearest to the fissure dimmed, as though lowering their activity. The particulate flow weakened on that side, drifting toward the opposite end of the basin. It was as if the system had redirected its attention, focusing energy away from the fissure and concentrating it around the broader platform. The drone navigated cautiously along the fissure's edge. Inside, the darkness was absolute, swallowing the lights almost immediately. The sensors detected a low-frequency hum emanating from within, matching the harmonics of the crystalline structures but deeper, older. The vibration seemed to originate from a point far below, beyond the vehicle's operational depth. But the mere existence of such harmonics implied a continuous system extending through layers of the trench previously believed to be solid bedrock. Suddenly, a shockwave of energy surged upward from the fissure. It was not explosive, not forceful enough to damage the drone, but potent enough to send its instruments into a frenzy of recalibration. The crystalline structures reacted again, flaring into brilliant white light that illuminated the entire basin like a submerged dawn. The particulate matter spiraled faster, forming columns of silver dust rising through the water. For several seconds, the trench floor resembled an otherworldly cathedral filled with shimmering pillars and radiant architecture. Then, just as quickly, the glow faded. The structures dimmed to their original blue, the particulate settled, and the basin returned to its eerie stillness. But the wave of energy had revealed one more astonishing detail. When the sediment briefly lifted, the outline of the submerged platform became clearer. Large sections of it were shaped in a way that resembled circuitry. Gigantic, elegant, almost organic circuitry. The implications struck the observation team like cold shock. If this was a natural formation, then Earth had created a system that mirrored the complexity of a constructed neural network. If this was artificial, then some force or intelligence, had engineered it in a place unreachable to any known civilization. And if the entire trench acted as a conduit or host for this system, then humanity had been unaware of an active network beneath its oceans for millennia. As the drone began its ascent, the crystalline towers pulsed once more in a slow, rhythmic pattern as though acknowledging the departure. The particulate mist dissipated gradually, drifting back into the currents. The trench returned to its ancient silence, hiding its geometry beneath layers of dark water. But the data gathered during the dive offered a glimpse into a hidden domain woven into the planet's deepest folds. The implications extended far beyond oceanography. Earth's biosphere had long been assumed to be driven only by familiar forms of life, organic, carbon-based, thriving under sunlight or chemical gradients. But the structures in the trench demonstrated behaviors that blurred the line between geology, biology, and technology. They suggested the possibility of systems that evolved, or were engineered, according to principles humanity had only begun to imagine. The resonances detected could represent communication. The particulate matter could be a form of adaptive microarchitecture. The submerged platform could be a massive distributed system, its function unknown but undeniably active. Perhaps it monitored geological changes. Perhaps it influenced ocean chemistry. Perhaps it was a relic of ancient processes predating the earliest known ecosystems. Or perhaps it was something entirely new, its purpose unrelated to anything in human experience. When the drone finally broke the surface, coated in a thin sheen of the shimmering particulate that clung to its hull, the team understood that the discovery would reshape assumptions not just about the trench, but about the planet itself. The deepest place on Earth had revealed a hidden architecture, silent, luminous, and far more complex than anyone had imagined. The terrain thought to be lifeless and inert had spoken in light, vibration, and form, hinting at a story older than human civilization, older perhaps than life as it was currently understood. The research vessel drifted in uneasy silence long after the drone was lifted back onto the deck. Engineers clustered around its shimmering hull, careful not to brush away the particles clinging like frost. The drone's metal panels, normally matte and unremarkable, now glimmered beneath the worklights as though dusted with crushed stars. The scientists assigned to collect initial samples hesitated, gloved hands hovering without touching. Every instinct told them to gather, document, and analyze, but something in the delicate, almost responsive shimmer discouraged abrupt movements. The drone had returned from a realm beyond comprehension, and the last thing anyone wished was to disrupt whatever subtle order still lingered on its surface. Inside the control room, the team replayed the footage again and again. Each time, new details emerged: tiny shifts in particulate flow, minute pulsations in the crystalline towers, subtle variations in the harmonics during the energy wave. The structure beneath the basin floor, glimpsed only briefly, now dominated every discussion. Engineers argued whether it could be a buried shell of some unknown mineral composite. Mathematicians insisted the geometry was too intentional. Oceanographers proposed unprecedented natural processes shaped by pressure and mineral cycling. Others suggested it might be something that had grown, not built. The lines between disciplines blurred as theories collided in a frenzy of excitement and disbelief. Yet the most unsettling aspect wasn't the structure itself, but the unmistakable way it reacted to the drone. Whether by design or by instinct, the crystalline formations and the particulate mist had behaved almost like a sentient environment, aware, responsive, measured. No one had ever recorded such synchronized interaction between non-living materials in nature. And if they weren't natural, then something had engineered them with precision bordering on elegance. A soft hum vibrated through the hull of the research vessel, jolting several technicians. Instruments flickered and the overhead lights dimmed before stabilizing. For a moment, the team worried the particulate on the drone had activated some interaction with the ship's electronics, but diagnostics remained normal. The anomaly seemed coincidental, though every coincidence now felt charged with meaning. The deep ocean had revealed only one mystery, but it was enough to make even ordinary mechanical quirks seem ominous. As night settled over the vessel, the research team separated into clusters, each absorbed in their own interpretations. No one slept easily. Beyond the quiet swell of waves, it felt as though the trench was still speaking, though its voice had been muted by distance. At dawn, the drone was prepared for a secondary analysis. Microscopic imaging of the particulate began with careful steps. The particles appeared inert at first, tiny fragments with reflective facets and thin filaments spiraling from their cores. But as the scanning laser passed over them, several particles shifted position, rearranging themselves into subtle arcs. The movements were small enough to escape notice without time-lapse observation. When the footage was accelerated, the pattern became unmistakable. The particles reacted to environmental changes even outside the trench. It raised a question no one wanted to voice. If the system at the trench floor had responded to the drone, could these particles act as extensions of that system elsewhere? The lead oceanographer ordered sealed containment, regulated temperature control, and minimized external stimuli. Whatever these particles were, they were still active. Not alive, perhaps, in any conventional sense, but responsive. While the onboard labs scrambled to keep up, the drone's engineers examined structural logs. One anomaly stood out among thousands of data points. During the brightest flare of the crystalline towers, the drone had recorded a faint electromagnetic pulse. The pattern was rhythmic, neither fully mathematical nor random, something between signal and resonance. The waveform appeared truncated, as though the drone had captured only the fading tail of a larger sequence. If there had been communication, it had not been directed at the drone but broadcast through the entire basin as part of a deeper cycle. The drone had merely stumbled into the middle of it. By midday, the research team gathered in the main lab to review their findings. A tension pulsed through the room as each specialist contributed fragments of understanding. No one could assemble the larger picture yet, but the pieces were clearly interconnected. The crystalline structures were not isolated formations. They were nodes of a much larger system embedded beneath the trench floor. The particulate responded not to biological cues, but to electromagnetic and acoustic shifts. The submerged platform pulsed at frequencies bridging geology and engineered resonance, and all of it seemed tied to a network sprawled through depths humans had never mapped. As theories surfaced, one stood out with increasing weight. The formation beneath the trench might not be an artifact or a biological system. It could be an environmental mechanism, a regulatory structure of some kind. The Earth was filled with layered systems that balance atmosphere, ocean circulation, magnetic fields, and tectonic activity. Perhaps the trench hid another, one that operated in silence for millions of years, using a medium humans had never recognized. This possibility carried profound implications. If the structure served a purpose, cooling, stabilizing, filtering, monitoring, disturbing even a small portion of it could alter the delicate equilibrium of the deep ocean. No one wanted to imagine the outcome if such a system were disrupted. The scientists argued again, voices low but strained. Some pushed for a second dive, insisting more data was crucial. Others warned that returning to the basin without understanding the system's behavior was reckless. The drone's presence had triggered reactions impossible to anticipate. If the structures considered the drone an interruption, a second intrusion might provoke a stronger response. Yet curiosity gnawed at them. The drone had unveiled something unprecedented, a system hidden beneath crushing pressure, thriving in absolute darkness, functioning without organic life. It defied every known model of Earth's processes, and its implications stretched beyond geology or oceanography. It hinted at a form of intelligence not born of cells or cognition, but woven into physical structures themselves. That night, a storm formed along the horizon. Wind skated across the waves, and the vessel rocked gently. Below deck, the particles continued to shift in their containment unit, rearranging into spirals, lattices, and branching paths. The patterns never repeated exactly, as though each configuration represented a new cycle of adaptation or analysis. The engineers monitoring the containment noted that the particles slowed their movement when placed near ultrasonic vibrations. They accelerated when exposed to certain frequencies of light. When the chamber temperature dropped slightly, they clustered closer together, forming denser structures like microtowers. These reactions suggested an underlying sensitivity not to biological stimuli, but to environmental ones: light, vibration, temperature, magnetism. The particles behaved almost like sensors or processors, interpreting incoming information and adjusting configuration. One researcher whispered that they resembled the smallest components of a vast computational lattice, nanostructures in a system far beyond human tools. The idea unsettled many, but could not be dismissed entirely. If the trench floor was a platform and the crystals acted as nodes, then the particles might be the connective tissue, the active medium transmitting information across the network. By morning, the storm intensified. Waves hammered the hull, and the vessel pitched with each surge. Equipment was secured and non-essential work paused, but the team's attention stayed fixed on the containment chamber. The particles inside, unaffected by the external turbulence, continued their silent reconfigurations. Some clusters formed intricate polyhedral shapes with mathematical regularity. Others stretched into thin strands that wove into temporary nets before collapsing into clouds again. One structure lasted longer than any previous configuration, a twisted spiral that extended across half the container. It mirrored the pattern displayed against the drone's viewport during the dive, though now far more detailed. Its precision left no room for coincidence. The particles were not simply reacting, they were communicating something, repeating a symbol or mechanism central to their function. As the storm raged overhead, the team began analyzing the spiral's geometry. It resembled principles found across the natural world: the curvature of galaxies, the growth of shells, the structure of hurricanes. Yet it contained angular deviations, intentional offsets that hinted at encoded information layered into the shape. It was a message of sorts, though deciphering it remained far beyond their current tools. Hours passed, the wind softened, the waves calmed, and daylight broke through the dissipating clouds. But before the team could resume external operations, a technician monitoring the sonar array froze as a signal pulsed across the screen. It came from the trench. The signal was faint, low frequency, and rhythmic. It echoed the harmonics recorded during the drone's descent, but now carried a slight variation. The pattern was slower, more deliberate. The array picked up secondary waves trailing behind the primary signal, like ripples following a stone cast into a pond. The frequency matched neither marine life nor tectonic activity. Something in the trench was active again. The vessel's captain hesitated, weighing safety against scientific urgency. The drone could be redeployed, but doing so might trigger another reaction, one impossible to predict. Yet ignoring the signal meant losing an opportunity that might never occur again. After tense deliberation, the decision was made. The drone would not be sent back immediately, but the ship would begin slow repositioning toward the edge of the descent path. Listening, watching, not interfering. The trench was speaking again, and this time the researchers chose to observe without intrusion. As evening approached, the sonar signals grew more complex. What began as simple harmonic pulses evolved into layered frequencies interwoven like chords. Some vibrated at wavelengths too low for human hearing. Others pulsed in ranges that caused equipment housings to hum softly. The water around the vessel carried vibrations that brushed the hull like phantom tremors, gentle but persistent. The particulate in containment responded instinctively. Their movement synchronized with the sonar pulses, forming shapes in harmony with the frequency patterns. At one point, the particles clustered into a vast circular lattice with radiating spokes, a shape reminiscent of a mechanical aperture or energy conduit. Then, as the sonar shifted, the lattice dissolved and reformed into nested rings that rotated in opposite directions. The scientists watched as though witnessing language in its purest, most alien form, a dialogue conducted through vibration and structure instead of sound and symbol. The trench's activity rose steadily for several hours before abruptly ceasing. The sonar field flattened, the water calmed. The particulate froze mid-motion for several seconds, suspended as if awaiting instructions, before settling again into their usual wandering patterns. Silence returned, but the team now shared a collective certainty. The trench's hidden system had not merely reacted to the drone, it had continued operating independently, cycling through some internal function or communication process. Its network extended beyond simple cause and effect. Whatever it was doing, it had been doing long before the drone arrived, and it would continue long after. The next morning brought clarity of purpose. The researchers assembled in the main lab to outline a cautious approach for further investigation. Their goal was no longer to extract samples or push deeper into the fissure. Instead, they sought to understand the system's behavior without provoking unpredictable responses. Remote sensors would be deployed across the descent path, passive instruments designed only to listen. Light emissions, vibration levels, electromagnetic fields, every measurable output would be monitored in hopes of mapping the system's cycles. Yet, as preparations unfolded, the trench surprised them again. At 10:32 a.m., a seismic reading rippled across the ocean floor. It was not a quake, too smooth, too rhythmic, but a wave of motion spreading outward from the basin where the drone had descended. The movement was subtle, shifting sediment layers rather than rock, but it carried through the water like a slow pulse, as though the subterranean structure had exhaled. Minutes later, the particulate in containment responded. The fragments arranged themselves into a branching form, resembling coral or neural dendrites. Each branch extended from the last with fractal precision, creating an intricate network that filled the chamber. The structure stabilized and remained intact far longer than any previous configuration. It was the most complex formation they had yet observed, a lattice that suggested connectivity, information flow, interaction. In that moment, the researchers realized the particles were not simply reacting, they were mirroring. The trench system operated on a scale too immense to visualize directly, but the particles provided a miniature reflection of its processes, like a living schematic. The implications deepened. If the trench's architecture extended through chambers, platforms, crystalline towers, and particulate networks, then Earth contained a hidden layer of activity permeating its deepest folds. Perhaps it had developed over geological timescales shaped by unknown pressures, minerals, and forces. Perhaps it was older than the oceans themselves. Its purpose remained elusive, but its stability suggested it played a role vital enough to persist across epochs. As the fractal structure inside containment continued to pulse with faint luminescence, the researchers leaned closer. The shimmer wasn't due to simple reflection. It came from internal energy, faint but unmistakable. The particles seemed capable of storing or channeling energy, much like components in a vast circuit. Late that evening, as fatigue settled over the vessel, the researchers gathered on deck, staring into the dark swell of waves above the trench. The water looked ordinary, yet they now knew it hid a system so intricate that it overshadowed every previous discovery of the deep. The planet's most mysterious place had revealed a glimpse of an architecture woven into depths no sunlight could touch. Far below, in silence and crushing pressure, the basin remained undisturbed. The crystalline towers slept in cold darkness, their harmonics quiet between cycles. The massive hidden platform lay still beneath layers of sediment, waiting for the next shift, the next pulse, the next whisper of energy through its chambers. The ocean, ancient and inscrutable, had opened one door, only one, and then receded into stillness. The drone's descent had illuminated a sliver of truth, yet countless questions remained suspended in the abyss. And though no one aboard the vessel could see it, deep within the trench, a faint glow flickered across the crystalline structures, soft, rhythmic, deliberate. A pulse echoed through the particulate clouds drifting across the basin floor. The subterranean chambers vibrated with the quiet resonance of a cycle continuing unseen. The system had resumed its work, undisturbed by the brief human intrusion. But something subtle had changed. A new tremor traveled through the crystalline lattice, gentle yet distinctly reactive. It echoed the pattern the drone had emitted during its descent, as though the trench had incorporated the memory of the encounter into its ongoing function. The deepest place on Earth had not merely revealed itself, it had listened. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the drone's Mariana Trench discovery revealed? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.